Hello, hello. Welcome back to Loki's Librarian. If you are new here, welcome. I am your librarian, Katrina, and this is where I am reading through the enormous library of books you see behind me, and then I give you a quick synopsis and tell you what I think about them. So if you like books, just aren't sure what to read next, hit that subscribe button, like and share my videos, and let me know what you think in the comments. I'm kind of doing like ancient civilization stuff. I waffle on doing a theme this month, but I'm doing ancient civilizations, or not ancient civilizations, parts of ancient, I don't know. Old things, very old things. That's the theme for this month. This week's book was an Amazon suggestion a while back, and it is Forgotten Civilization, New Discoveries on the Solar-Induced Dark Age by Robert M. Schoch, PhD, with Catherine Ulissey as kind of a contributing author to the ideas in the book. The accompanying cocktail is called Drink End of Days. It is 2 ounces of Mezcal, 1 ounce of Aperol, a ½ ounce of lime juice, a ½ ounce of Agave Syrup, a quarter teaspoon, big difference, quarter teaspoon of Cayenne Pepper, and a pinch of sea salt. So let's do this. I am not quite sure what I was expecting with this book. That's not quite true. I was expecting a lot more civilization and a lot less this is what ruined prior civilizations. Now, while it wasn't what I was expecting, it was still quite good, and I learned many interesting things while reading this book, actually. I have, again, a not very long review, so I don't want to waste any time jumping into the cocktail portion of it so that I'm not still mixing, especially when there are this many ingredients involved. So we got our 2 ounces of Mezcal there, ounce of Aperol. Now, the book starts at Easter Island and a discussion of the Moai and the Rongo Rongo script. Now, I'm not sure how many untranslated, undecipherable scripts there are. There's at least 7 that I know of, and Rongo Rongo is certainly one of them. And these are scripts that are very ancient that we have absolutely no idea what they say. And that is kind of a mystery for the ages. They're still trying to translate a couple of them, including Rongo Rongo. And there are many reasons for this, most of which come down to colonization, at least in the Western Hemisphere. If you go back to India, not so much. There's a couple of scripts in India and China that they don't know what they say, and we just haven't found the key to translating them. We haven't found that Rosetta Stone that Napoleon found that allowed us to understand what was going on with the hieroglyphs. I have a very old thing of lime juice, and then I have a new thing of lime juice. Ooh, perfect. Don't need the new thing of lime juice. But for all that, Rongo Rongo is one of them. And basically colonization came in, destroyed the native culture on the island, leaving no one who may have been able to translate them alive to do so. However, Schoch, independently of a group of physicists at Los Alamos National Labs led by Anthony Perrott, realized that this might not be a script at all. Rongo Rongo looks a lot like petroglyphs that have been left behind by ancient people around the globe. I mean, there's petroglyphs here in Nevada. I've driven by them. I've even seen them up close once, although it's been 20 years since that happened. I really need to go back out and see. Need to go back out and make it a point to see. I should have done the agave syrup before the lime juice. Oh well. But still, there's petroglyphs all over the world, and as Perrott and Schoch and Perrott's team realized, the petroglyphs and the Rongo Rongo look a lot alike. They also look like what a plasma display looks like as seen in solar bursts a la Aurora Borealis. All right, this is what they look like. Apparently they can create these intense, bizarre animal-type shapes. So Schoch revisits his hypothesis, and that's interesting, right? I mean, it might not be a dead language at all. It could be a snapshot of a moment in time, if you will. This is what the sky was doing once upon a time. Isn't that interesting? Try not to get this in my eye. That would be a bad thing. It would hurt. Now Schoch revisits his Sphinx hypothesis. This is going to be a kick in the pants. A quarter teaspoon of cayenne pepper is actually quite a bit of cayenne pepper. I don't really have that is definitely not a pinch. I have to shake this up. I'm supposed to garnish it with a slice of hot pepper. I have I don't remember. It's a toasted red pepper. I used it for making Mexican food a couple weeks ago, which was fantastic. It was from Danny Trejo's cookbook. Highly recommend. Chile de árbol, that's it. Toasted chile de árbol. That is going to be my garnish for this one. Just stick that in there and see if I can fry my mouth out. And I'm going to be really irritated because I didn't bring water up with me. If I didn't bring water up with me and this is really hot, it's about to suck for me. So, Schoch revisits his hypothesis that the Sphinx was originally built when Egypt was a hell of a lot more damp than it currently is. I mean, obviously it's very arid right now. I mean, the Saharan desert takes up a not insignificant chunk of land in Egypt. But he's saying that the Sphinx was built when there was a lot more rainfall. And I mean, we're talking torrential rainfalls, right? And that's kind of what I thought the book was about. And while he doesn't go into great detail on that, it is covered in this book. He goes into more detail on it in his book Origins of the Sphinx, which I think is what I thought I was buying when I bought this one. Clearly not, and that's okay. But he touched on his hypothesis here, and he makes good points. I mean, it certainly helps that he has his PhD in geology. Basically, if anybody is going to be able to identify what water off a stone looks like, it would be a professional geologist. So he posits, based on the wear and tear of the rocks and the average rainfall and what's going on, basically everything about the Sphinx, he says it was built sometime between 7,000 and 5,000 years before Common Era. So that would be between 9,000 and 7,000 years from today's date, if you will. And he revisits that the established archaeologists stick to the party line that the Sphinx is only as old as Khepri, the pharaoh Khepri, so approximately 4,500 years ago, or 2,500 BCE. And part of the reason they are so certain that the Sphinx cannot be as old as Schoch claims is that there is no proof of any civilization that old. It is hard to believe that I have not had anything to drink today. I've been busting my butt doing homework all day, so I'm recording very late. And homework and alcohol are not conducive just for safety reasons, since it's a gunsmithing course. So if I have anything to drink today, I'm just slurring naturally, apparently. Let's remedy that. It's not terrible. Definitely has a little bit of a kick to it, but it's not as awful as hate was. Kind of sweet. It's got a little spice. Not bad. I can drink this. Part of the reason that the establishment is so certain that the Sphinx cannot be as old as Schoch claims is there is no proof of any civilizations being that old. And there wasn't until, Schmidt located Göbekli Tepe and started excavating that, which has been covered in depth by Graham Hancock, and is some pretty definitive proof of some level of civilization around 9,500 BCE. And if that was capable in 9,500 BCE, then the Sphinx certainly is 2,500 years after that at 7,000 years BCE. And Schoch moves into what exactly is civilization, which is certainly a fair question. How can you say that it's never existed before if you can't even define what it is? Cities top the list, right? You have to have a large enough group of people living together for it to be a civilization. It's not terrible. I don't know that it would be my favorite thing ever, but it's certainly drinkable. Cities top the list. Large settlements where people live together allows for full-time specialization in various fields, like craftsmen. You'll get the professional woodsmiths, you'll get the blacksmiths, the doctors, food producers, priests. Those who are not priestly classes tend to pay tithe toward the church, whatever church may be. It's not necessarily the Catholic Church. It could be the Roman temples, where they worshipped Jupiter and Hera, or Zeus and Athena, whatever. So it's not necessarily church, but it's where they pay tithe to the priestly class, essentially. Monumental public buildings like Göbekli Tepe is certainly a strong argument for a civilization of some sort. The people have to be stable enough to be able to build such monuments. And that's a fair point. It's really hard to build monuments if you're, moving every 6 weeks, for example. If they are not engaged in producing food, they're supported by those producers, which provide services of their own, not simply trade. We kind of get this bureaucratic class going on. So, civil and military leaders, a ruling class, that's considered civilization. Interestingly enough, written language is seen as proof of civilization. Basically, they're saying if they didn't have a written language, they weren't civilized and it doesn't count. Rise in arts, foreign trade, and specialist craftsmen. These are the things which are equated with civilization. And I know I've said it before, but I would ask those who insist that this is the list that proves a culture is civilized, how that list jives with the native tribes of America, and just kind of watch them squirm, because I mean, tribes like, the Cherokee didn't have a written language until the 19th century after they had contact with the European colonizers. So go ahead. Tell them they aren't civilized, or, weren't until they met white people. I double dog dare you. Now, he makes the case that Göbekli Tepe and the Sphinx are proof of those civilizations, even without necessarily writing, right? So what happened to them? Here's where the book went into a lot of speculation. And he knows it's speculation, because that's all it can be, right? We don't have like the proverbial smoking gun that proves that what he's saying is true. But it's some pretty solid speculation. He pulls on massive scientific texts to back up his hypothesis of what happened, and it all revolves around the Younger Dryas and the sun. Now, the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis was explored in some of Graham Hancock's books in some detail, actually, and I assumed, I don't know why, but I assumed it was named after a Younger Dryas, two guys named Younger and Dryas who formulated the theory, which shows just how very little I know, because it actually refers to a specific point in geological history from the time the last ice age started, approximately 10,900 years before Common Era, and ended abruptly. And I mean abruptly. Scientists have almost nailed down the exact day that it ended, 9,700 years before Common Era. And it actually references a specific type of plant life. He names it in the book, and I don't remember what it is, but that's it. It's this very brief 1,200 year span where the Earth got cooler and then suddenly heated up again. And while he personally does not seem to believe that it was a comet that impacted the Earth and led to the end of the Younger Dryas, he believes it may have been a different impact, like cataclysmic solar bursts, that led to the end of the period. And he provides some pretty compelling arguments to support his belief. I mean, he explains what exactly happened with the Carrington event in the 19th century, which I had only heard of very briefly and never really looked into. But essentially it was just a solar flare. And we know it was a solar flare because the guy who saw it, one gentleman named Carrington, saw it through his telescope. And he saw it, and then like within 60 hours, there were mass disruptions with telegraph wires the world over. So, and you can see these things through a telescope. I know you're not supposed to look directly at the sun, but there are ways to make a telescope safe to do so. Hell, you can look directly at the sun if you have a piece of obsidian. Isn't that interesting? Given that we know how widely the Mayan culture worshipped the sun, and that they heavily used obsidian for a lot of things. But if you have a piece of obsidian, you can hold it up and look directly at it at the sun, and you're not going to hurt your eyes at all. I learned that on my cruise to Cozumel, actually, which was really interesting. Bought a piece of obsidian just so I could look at the sun. But this is how you could maybe be able to see a solar flare happen. So Carrington happened to be right guy, right time, right place. He saw the flares happened, reported this was happening, and then everybody's like, oh, how interesting. Then, like 3 days later, everything went down briefly. Now, that was a look at this moment in time back in the 19th century, but if we had a larger Carrington event, it could shut down the whole planet. And he goes into some detail on how exactly that could happen and how we could all re-experience a dark age, right? And it would be catastrophic. Make no mistake, with huge chunks of humanity living in civilization, right? We're all living in cities, we're all city dwellers. A Carrington event that wiped out our network, a giant EMP that wipes out the planet. Like I said last week, there's a reason that genre of book is called post-apocalyptic fiction. It would be absolutely fucking devastating. And we're talking, we're at a world population now of like, 7 billion? And we could probably reduce that to about 1 billion globally in about a month following a massive Carrington event that would wipe out all infrastructure, basically, because people would die of mass starvation. There just wouldn't be enough food going around. He pulls some of his supporting documents from some really surprising places, like the Bible. Now, I don't discount this out of hand. I may not necessarily agree that the Bible is the Word of God, but I do believe the Bible was certainly written by man, and likely it's testimony and stories that were related orally until the means to write them down occurred. Kind of like Aesop's fables, right? There are some outstanding morality lessons provided in the Bible, and I believe that even though I'm not a Christian. And I also find it absolutely fascinating that those same people who would say that civilization starts with writing will exclude one of our oldest foundational texts simply because of the God angle. I mean, you would be very hard-pressed to say the Bible isn't a foundational text of Western civilization. Or rather, you could say you would be utterly disingenuous. He does consider the multitude of flood myths that are globally provided. And like all cultures have a flood myth, right? Most of them passed down orally until writing for that culture existed. It keeps coming back to writing, and it actually irritates me. I don't think that writing is the be-all and end-all of civilization. I think if you limit proof of civilization to writing, you cut off large chunks of the world who didn't develop on Europe's timeline. And this is like a anti-white, anti-colonizer thing. This is just a common fucking sense thing, right? Not everybody develops on the same timeline. We all get the same 24 hours in a day. The earth spins the same way for everybody, but people develop differently and in their own time. And that doesn't make them any less civilized than Europeans. And one could argue that they were a hell of a lot more civilized than the Europeans who slaughtered people wholesale for the audacity of worshiping a different god. I'm going to get off that soapbox now. I've said it before, and I still say it. I'm going to get off that soapbox. He did include some rather interesting appendices at the end of the book. One of them addresses politics, money, and science. Isn't that fun? He pointed out that if you want to know where the science is going, follow the money. Money flows from political power, and that is hard to argue with these days, don't you think? I quite enjoyed this book. It gave me food for thought. It gave me lots of ideas to turn over in my head. It gave me something else to worry about for a pending apocalypse. I mean, I always thought it might be civil war, and now I think the sun might just come and explode us all. And that's it for this week. If you liked what you saw, don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you guys next Sunday. Bye.